There are 12 ascetic practices. 1. Wearing rag robes. The first one deals with clothing. What kind of clothing? Rag robes. Robes with hundreds of patches. One finds old, unwanted clothing on refused hips, washes it, and stitches it into a robe. What are the advantages of wearing such a robe, you may ask? If you wish to know the advantages, there are many. If you want to talk about the disadvantages, there are also many. Wearing rag robes, you do not become greedy for fine clothes or become vain, as often happens when one puts on a new garment. It helps do away with one's own greed, and it also helps to lessen the greed of others. When people see you, they think that old cultivator is dressed in rags, not fine clothes. He's a true adept, and I should imitate him. By means of your example, other bishops also resolve to cultivate the way. So there are many advantages to the practice. And what are the disadvantages? When you wear rags, thieves leave you alone. For example, when I was living at Nanhua Monastery, one night a gang of thieves came to loot the monastery. They broke down the door and then demanded that I hand over the money. Said, "Look at my robe. Do I look like a rich man?" I was wearing the same rag robe that I had worn in Manchuria when I sat in mourning for 3 years beside my mother's grave. When I had finished the term of mourning, I continued to wear it in memory of her. In Manchuria, when my disciples took refuge, each of them gave me an inch-sized patch for my robe. It was really ragged, but I had a lot of patches. Then I said, "There are valuables in my room, go get them." But when they took a good look at me, dressed in rags, they decided I probably had nothing worth taking, and so they didn't go. Actually, there were two living treasures in my room at the time. One was Dharma Master Farming, and the other was Dharma Master Tzu Yin from Hawaii. At that time, they were still young novices. Thus, when you wear rag robes, thieves keep their distance. The rich also stay away, and this saves a lot of trouble. Another important factor, women leave you alone. After you've worn your rag robe for a while, it takes on a rare fragrance which women find offensive. One could never finish speaking of the advantages of wearing rag robes. 2. Possessing only 3 robes. Cultivating this bitter practice, one owns nothing except one's 3 robes. It is said, owning nothing beyond the limits of one's person, vexation and annoyance do not arise. Bishops who undertake this practice have only 3 robes. The first is the Samgati, the great or host robe. It is commonly made of 25 strips of cloth. Each strip has 4 long and 1 short piece. The patches represent fields in which, through making offerings, the faithful can plant causes for future blessings. This robe is worn when entering the king's palace, when taking the seat to speak Dharma, and when begging for food. The second is the Uttara Sangha, the robe worn when entering the assembly. Made of 7 pieces, it is worn by bishops when attending sutra and drama lectures. The third is the Antavasaka, the all-purpose work robe, made of 5 pieces, which is worn in the monastery when doing manual labor and in all ordinary situations. A bishop who cultivates ascetic practices should only have 3 robes, his bowl and his bowing cloth. The first 2 ascetic practices deal with clothing. The next 5 deal with that most important human activity, eating. 3. Begging for food. Sometimes this practice is given as always begging for food. Always does not mean all day long, for then one would have more food than one could eat. Rather, it means that every day in the morning, bhikshus go to collect alms and their midday meal. They do not cook their own food. In countries such as Burma and Ceylon, the donor will prepare an extra bowl of food as an offering to the triple jewel. They offer it to the first bhikshu who passes by the house on his begging rounds. They kneel respectfully, hold the bowl over their heads, pour the contents into the bhikshu's bowl, and then bow 3 times. 4. Consecutive begging. One begs from house to house, paying no attention to whether families are rich or poor. In the Suragama Sutra, we read, at that time, Ananda took up his alms bowl and as he traveled through the city, received alms in sequential order. As he set out to receive alms from the first to the last donors, his vegetarian hosts, he thought not to question whether they were pure or impure, whether they were Kshatriyas of honorable name or Chandalas. While practicing equality and compassion, he would not discriminate against the lowly, but was determined to perfect all beings' limitless merit and virtue. The practice of consecutive begging helps rid one of discrimination and allows one to give all living beings an equal opportunity to plant blessings regardless of whether they are rich or poor. It is an act of great unselfishness. 5. Eating only one meal at midday. In the morning and evening, one does not eat. One eats only one meal per day, and that is taken before noon. This is an excellent practice, but unfortunately, it is not an easy one. Why? Because it is said the people take food as their foundation. Everybody likes to eat. Human beings are born with a desire for food, and whether they get the slightest bit hungry, they want to eat something. This usually happens at morning and evening as well as at lunchtime. Eating once a day saves a lot of trouble. Cutting out 2 meals a day, one spends less time on the toilet. It would be impossible to enumerate in full all the virtues derived from the practice of eating only once a day. In general, if you eat a little less, you'll have a little less trouble. If you eat too much, you'll have more trouble. Whenever bhikshus eat, they must observe 3 recollections and 5 contemplations. The 3 recollections are: I vow to cut off all evil. I vow to cultivate all good. I vow to save all living beings. You vow to cause all living beings to leave suffering and find happiness. The 5 contemplations are: 1. Consider the amount of work involved in preparing the food. How much human labor was involved in preparing the food? Take, for example, the rice. It had to plant it, tend it, and harvest it. Although today we use machines, people formerly had to grind it and remove the husks. Then it has to be cooked and sold. A lot of effort went into every single grain. The ancients had a verse: hoeing the grain in the midday sun. The farmer's sweat falls into the earth. Who would have guessed how much toil went into every single grain in the plate? So the people of all nations should take care not to waste material goods or casually throw things away. One should consider the difficulty involved in making and distributing goods. The reason that some countries are now stricken with famine is because in the past they were wasteful. Those who believe in Buddhism should be particularly careful in matters of cause and effect and always be thrifty. Use what you can and give what is left over to others. Don't throw things away. It is said, if there's rice wasted in the house, there will be hungry people in the streets. If you waste food, it is as if you were taking it from the mouths of others. If you have more than you can eat. Give it to those who have nothing to eat. Don't waste it. So the first of the 5 contemplations is to consider the amount of work involved in getting the food to the table. 2. Reflect on whether or not one's virtuous conduct is sufficient to entitle one to receive this offering. Think it over. What virtuous practice have you done to entitle you to receive offerings from the 10 directions? Is your merit sufficient or is it lacking? If it is lacking, you should hurry and cultivate the way. 3. Guard the mind from transgressions committed mainly through greed. Avoid the offenses created primarily through greed, hatred, and stupidity. Don't greedily gobble down the good food and leave the bad food sitting there. Look on all the food as the same and do not discriminate among the good and bad flavors. 4. Regard the food as medicine to prevent the body from collapsing. While he eats, the bhikshu should think of his food as medicine. Why I am eating? I am actually taking medicine because if I don't eat, I waste away and die. 5. Take this food only in order to accomplish the way. I eat only because I want to work hard and cultivate the way. If I don't eat, I won't be able to stand up or sit properly. I could still sleep, but that can't be considered cultivation. Since I want to cultivate, I can't avoid eating, but I do so only because I want to cultivate. Bhikshus must always observe these 3 recollections and 5 contemplations when they eat. There are a great many advantages to be gained by eating 1 meal a day. 6. Eating a fixed and moderate amount of food. This is the 4th of the 5 ascetic practices dealing with food. A moderate amount means that just because the food is good, you don't gorge yourself with it. Eating a fixed amount means that you eat the same amount every day. For example, every day you eat exactly 2 bowls of food, whether the food is tasty or not. You wouldn't eat only 1 bowl of bad food one day and the next, when the menu has improved, eat 3. Those who cultivate ascetic practices should reduce the amount of food they consume. If they can eat 2 bowls, then they should eat 1.5. 7. Not drinking juices afternoon. After midday, one does not drink milk, juice, or other nourishing liquids. It's a very difficult practice because even tea is prohibited. Those are the 5 which deal with food. I have a small announcement. We will be holding a chant session here in a few days, and during that time, the lectures on the sutra will temporarily be discontinued and instructional talks on chant meditation will be given each day. Those of you who like to meditate can join the session. Others who prefer to work can continue to work and just come to sit or listen to lectures in your spare time. Next are the 5 which deal with dwelling. 8. Dwelling in an aranya. Aranya is a Sanskrit word which means a still and quiet place. The noise of the bustling city does not reach one who dwells deep in the mountain groves in an aranya. It is therefore an excellent place in which to cultivate. 9. Dwelling beneath a tree. Dwelling in an aranya, one still has the fixed place in which one dwells. Why would one want to live at the base of a tree? Cultivators take the earth and sky as their cottage and the forces as their home. They dwell wherever they happen to be. Dwelling at the base of a tree, one avoids the rain and is very refreshed as well. However, one may only dwell for 2 nights beneath any one tree. On the third day, one has to find another tree. Bhikshus who genuinely cultivate and who are lofty and pure in their practice wish to avoid recognition and offerings. After spending 2 nights in a place they live, no one can find them and no affinities are established. 10. Dwelling in an open. Dwelling beneath a tree, one is still protected from the wind and rain by the leaves and branches. Dwelling in the open, one truly takes the earth and sky as one's house. Living in this way, one is very natural and free. One bathes in the light of the moon and stars. It is said, when the moon arrives at the center of the sky and the wind blows across the surface of the waters, there's a kind of clear special flavor. Guess how few have tasted it. Very few people have any idea how wonderful such a lifestyle is. 11. Dwelling in a graveyard. You sleep with the dead, sit in the graveyard, and enjoy camaraderie with the ghosts. What for? In order to contemplate impermanence and understand the ephemeral nature of human life. Sooner or later, we are all going to die. After we die, we decompose into a heap of bleached out bones in the grave. Cultivating at the graveyard, you awaken to the doctrine that all is impermanent, and you will be able to relinquish your attachments and will not become involved in the workings of greed, hatred, and stupidity. 12. Always sitting and never lying down. When you cultivate this practice, your ribs never touch the mat. In India, there was a venerable master seer who throughout his whole life never once lay down. One who sleeps in a prone position may develop a need for more and more sleep and never think to get up and cultivate. If you always sit, when you awake, you're all ready to begin cultivating and sit in meditation. This practice is a great aid for cultivation. Some people may practice only one or perhaps a few of the 12 ascetic practices. For example, they may only practice wearing rag robes, or only practice restricting themselves to 3 robes, or only practice begging for food, or only practice consecutive begging, or only practice eating 1 meal a day, or only practice eating a fixed moderate amount of food, or only practice dwelling in a graveyard, or only practice always sitting and never lying down. Although a very old man, Mahakashyapa practiced all 12 ascetic practices in accord with the Dharma. Thus he was foremost of those who cultivated asceticism. Aruvilva Kashyapa, Gaya Kashyapa, Nadi Kashyapa. Previously, there was the great Kashyapa, and now we have Uruvilva Kashyapa. Uruvilva's name means papaya grove, as it is said that he liked to cultivate in a papaya grove. Gaya's name means city, and Nadi's name means river. These 3 brothers had all been fire worshippers before they took refuge with the Buddha, believing that fire was the most powerful of spiritual forces and the mother of all creation. They worshipped it with slavish devotion, bowing and making offerings to it. Would you say this was stupid or not? As meaningless as it was, they continued to do it until they met Shakyamuni Buddha. Shariputra. Probably everyone remembers who Shariputra was. There's a special story about Shariputra which makes him hard to forget. Shariputra's mother often used to debate with her younger brother Mahakaushtila, and she lost every time. Strangely enough, when she became pregnant with Shariputra, she began winning all the debates. Mahakashatila figured that the child in his older sister's womb was surely a wise one and was helping his mother, augmenting her eloquence and intelligence. I had better get some rhetorical skills, he thought, otherwise I'd be defeated by my own little nephew, which would truly be disgraceful. So he went to southern India to study. He was so industrious that he studied night and day and didn't take time to cut his hair, shave his beard, or even cut his fingernails. They grew to several inches in length, and everyone called him the long-nailed Brahman. He didn't deliberately let them grow, as do the long-haired bearded ones of today, who have dropped out of school. He was simply too busy to attend to his grooming. A model student, he labored day and night to the exclusion of all other activities. When he had mastered the Indian books of medicine, divination, physiognomy, and astrology, as well as literature and debating skills, he returned and asked his sister, "Where is my nephew?" "He has left home under the Buddha," she replied. Kaustila was outraged. "My nephew began preaching when he was 8 years old and has astounded the entire country by out-debating several hundred philosophers. How could such an intelligent child live the home life under a mere Shramana? It's pathetic." Arrogant and upset, he went to see the Buddha. "I'll have to see what special tricks that Shramana has that he managed to fool my brilliant nephew into becoming his disciple." When he met the Buddha, no matter how he tried to counter him, he failed. He had studied for so many years, not even bothering to cut his nails in preparation for his debate with his nephew. Who would have guessed it would all have come to nothing? His nephew had left home under the Buddha, and he himself had no idea what branch of his learning to use against the Buddha. He finally decided to set forth his doctrine. "What is your doctrine?" the Buddha asked him. "I take non-accepting as my doctrine," Kaustila replied. "No matter what you say, I won't accept it, because I take non-accepting as my principle. Let's see what you can do with that. Speak up." "Fine," said the Buddha. "You take non-accepting as your doctrine, but let me ask you, do you or do you not accept your view of non-accepting?" What a question! If he answered that he accepted his view, in accepting it he would be contradicting his own view of non-accepting. On the other hand, if he said that he did not accept his own view, he wouldn't have any doctrine at all, and how could he take non-accepting as his doctrine? If he accepted it, he would contradict himself, and if he refused it, he wouldn't have a doctrine at all. He didn't have a leg to stand on. He was like a rootless tree. To make matters worse, before he began, he had made a bet with the Buddha, saying, "If I win the debate, then my nephew comes home with me. If I lose, I'll cut off my head and give it to you." Now scared to lose his head, he had no recourse but to run. When he had run about 5 miles, he stopped and thought, "I am a man after all. How can I go back on my word? I agreed to cut off my head if I lost. How can I run like a coward? He decided to return, cut off his head, and consider the matter closed. When he arrived, he asked the Buddha for a knife, and the Buddha said, "What do you want it for?" "I agreed to cut off my head if I lost the debate," said Kaustila, "and so now I owe you my head. Isn't that correct?" "There is no such drama within my Buddha drama," said the Buddha. "If you lost it, so let's just forget it. What's the use of cutting off your head?" The Buddha then spoke the Dharma to him, and he obtained the purification of the Dharma eye. When his Dharma eye opened, he realized the marvelous, unfathomable profundity of the Buddha Dharma. "I spent all that time learning non-Buddhist teachings. They are not even a 10,000th part as good as the Buddha Dharma," he said. And he left home under the Buddha. Not only did he not regain his nephew, he joined the Buddha Sangha himself.